Welcome, everyone. It is Saturday afternoon of Comic-Con. We're here. We're doing it. My name is Jenni Marchisotto. I'm one of the co-owners of Mysterious Galaxy, which is a local independent bookstore. I'm also a lecturer at UC San Diego, and I'm going to be your moderator. Today, am I okay distance from the mic? Okay, cool. Today we're here to talk about the power of fandom and the communities that develop out of shared love of media, books in particular. Your authors, who I'll introduce in just a moment, are wildly creative, to put it lightly. From the grumpy sunshine friendship of a talking show cat and former Coast Guard, to sexy snakes, to the horrifically improbable becoming seemingly inevitable, to a sorority with a very specific palette, these authors' works may sound fantastical, maybe even a bit unhinged, but they have brought together readers in absolutely amazing ways. Before we get started, just a bit of housekeeping. After the panel, our wonderful panelists will be signing books in the autograph area / the sales pavilion, which is if you go out, you're gonna make a left and follow the aisle. They will be at AA06 for Lindsay, Chuck, and Olivie. Matt will be at AA03. Okay. You're welcome to bring any personal copies of the books, anything you would like to get signed, up to the author's discretion. We do not charge for any signatures, but if you would like to purchase any of the books and support these authors, support Mysterious Galaxy, you may do so at Mysterious Galaxy's table in the autograph area. You'll pass it on the way to AA06 and AA03, and we'll have all of their books for sale there. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce the panelists and move into some of the questions. So we have Olivie Blake. Olivie is the New York Times bestselling author of sci-fi fantasy for adults, including the Atlas 6 trilogy, Alone with You in the Ether, Masters of Death, the short story collection Januaries, and her most recent novel, Girl Dinner. With Little Chimera, she is also the co-creator of the graphic series Clara and the Devil, and as Alexine Farrell-Holmes, she is also the author of the young adult novels My Mechanical Romance and Twelfth Night. Her next book, Girl Dinner, is due out in October. Next up, we have Matt Dinniman. Matt Dinniman is a writer, artist, and musician. Well, he's a bass player. From Gig Harbor, Washington. He's the author of several books, including the best-selling Dungeon Crawler Carl. Lindsay Straube. Lindsay Straube is a writer living in Portland, Oregon. She drinks tequila with lemon and watches TV with subtitles on, as do I.
Yes.
On any given Tuesday, you can find her at the movies. Chuck Tingle. Chuck Tingle is the USA Today bestselling author of Camp Damascus, Bury Your Gaze, and Straight. His books have been finalists for the Bram Stoker and Kaliba Golden Poppy Award. He's a mysterious force of energy behind sunglasses and a pink mask. He is also an anonymous author of romance, horror, and fantasy. Tingle was born in Home of Truth, Utah, and now lives in Los Angeles. Tingle writes to prove love is real because love is the most important tool we have when resisting the endless cosmic void. Not everything people say about Tingle is true, but the important parts are. His next book, Lucky Day, will be released in August. All right, so to start, and we're gonna start going down the line, I would love for each of you to share a bit about your current book, your current work, and your path as a writer and with publishing, as well as with readers and fans. Yeah.
Hello. Oh my gosh. Okay, that's loud. I would have sat at the other end if I'd known I was going to be first. My name's Lindsay Straube, like you mentioned. My book, which I should have one, but I don't, is Kiss of the Basilisk. And what was the question? Already forgot.
A little bit about your journey so far in publishing and with fans.
Okay, fabulous. My journey is a little weird, and quite frankly, I wouldn't even necessarily recommend it to anyone. I started as a bookstagram, which if you don't know, it's just an Instagram talking about books, and I did a lot of memes using Renaissance paintings, just kind of funny, cheeky memes. And one day I decided I really want to make merch, and so I launched a bunch of merch on a website, And just for fun, I put the first chapter of a book I'd been writing on the website, and no one bought the merch. But that chapter got 500 page hits, and the next morning I woke up to a bunch of DMs of people asking me, where's chapter 2? And I was like, well, bitch, I don't know. Can I say bitch?
I don't make the rules.
Okay.
It's too late now.
I said, bitch, I don't know. I better write it. And so I kept writing, and people on my Bookstagram started following me for these chapter drops, and I started putting them first on the website, and then eventually I changed to having a newsletter where weekly, or like I think it was like tri-weekly, I would just send out a chapter a day, and people would read. I sent them out at noon always. People would read them at work and like DM me and losing their minds over them. And if you're not familiar with me and my work, you should know it's extremely erotic. Kiss of the Basilisk, as you can tell from the title, is a monster romance. And so people were reading these chapter drops over the course of a summer and kind of all going through this collective horny renaissance together. And so the role of fans and readers in my publishing story cannot be understated. It really was a word of mouth thing. People started signing up for the newsletter. And then at the end of the summer, I dropped the hard copy on Amazon. I just did their self-publishing tool. And that day or the next day, it started ranking on the charts. And I think I signed with my agent. She contacted me like the next day. And from there, I got picked up by Bloom, who's with Source Books. They're like a... And that was that. And here we are. And so it's really been an interesting road, and I owe it all to my readers completely.
Yeah.
So my name's Matt Dinniman. I have actually, I think it's kind of similar in some ways, minus the basilisk sex. I've been writing for a very, very long time. I've wanted to be a writer since I was a little kid. I used to, when I was in punk bands in Tucson, Arizona, as a teenager, we used to make zines, and staple them together. I still haven't had anybody bring one to me yet, but hopefully one day somebody will, because I don't have them anymore. But self-publishing has been part of my life for a very long time. My first book, which came out way back in 2003, was published by a publisher, but it was a very small publisher, and the book after that as well. But in 2015 or 17, I wrote a book called Dominion of Blades, which was a lit RPG novel, just like a nerd sci-fi book, and I self-published it. And when I did that, I made more money in the first 24 hours self-publishing than I had in my entire publishing career up to that point. And it just kind of took off a little bit from there. And every book since then I had self-published. In 2020, during the pandemic, I wrote a book called Dungeon Crawler Carl. And yeah. Thank you. And that came out in the end of 2020. I had no job because I was an artist, and the pandemic kind of, kicked all of us who went to shows for a living right in the nuts. We didn't have any money, so I put it online, and I had a Patreon, and I was hoping to make some money. And one day I just woke up in early 2021, and I saw a message online, hey, I really liked your book. And then suddenly the next few days, it was a few more people. And it wasn't as quick as Lindsay's, but over time, we started selling more and more and more and more. And eventually, Trad noticed that I was suddenly selling tens of thousands of copies a month. And now we're selling literally hundreds of thousands of copies a month. So it's been a meteoric rise that hasn't stopped since then. And it's all because of you guys. It's all, like she says, it's all word of mouth.
It's funny, Matt said similar to Lindsay's, but less kissing basilisks. And I would say my journey was similar to Lindsay's, but just as much kissing basilisks, actually. Very similar. I started self-publishing erotica that most would consider surrealist in some way. I would say that Pounded in the Butt by My Own Butt is a pretty popular title for examples, or the Hugo Award nominated Space Raptor Butt Invasion. So that were the titles. Those were the titles that I was publishing, and I still publish. And I have written about 400 of these, what I would call tinglers. One for every day. If you want to do a tingle a day, you've got some choices. You could spend a whole year doing that. I kind of got a pretty large following based on that. And then one day, I have always loved horror, and I just kind of decided to write a horror novel, which was Camp Damascus, which I think is right here. Oh my gosh, thank you. And I went on what was known at the time as Twitter, and I sent out a tweet that said, I wrote a horror novel. Do any big-time publishers want to publish it? And then, you know what? I was thinking about this the other day, and then I looked at the time, and 20 minutes later in my inbox was someone saying, I would like to publish your book. So that was nice. And that story is a very... I like to tell it that way because it sounds really funny of how do you get a book deal? Well, you just tweet, I'd like a book deal. But in reality, that really, the long version of that was, it was just like a lot of time writing all these books, building a fan base. And that's why fans are so important to me is, as fun as the short version is to tell, it really is the long version of just like connecting with all you buckaroos and writing stories that people connect with. So it is really an honor to be here, and it's also an honor to be with all these wonderful authors, so thank you.
Boy, it's not very often I feel like some pumpkin spice basic bitch on a panel, but I feel that way right now. Okay, so let's see. No, I'm looking at you because I just love to look at you. So I started as a fan fiction writer. Yeah. My psychiatrist didn't refill my pills one day, so I was like, this is the most 2016 sentence that I can speak aloud, which is that I took a BuzzFeed quiz called What Fanfic Should You Read? And I got the answer Isolation by Bex Chan. And, oh, really? No one? All right. And I was like, what is fan fiction? And then so it was just like in the middle of the night, like this is something I can do because I'm awake. And immediately I got a comment and I was like, oh my God. It was a very negative review. But I was like, someone is reading this. Like, this is crazy. I've sort of always fallen back on writing. That's like my preferred medium because I'm, an indoor cat and a book girly. And so, but I had never had the realization that you could just write something and someone could read it. And it was this crazy, like, communion moment. So, I kept writing. I stopped writing fan fiction, stopped focusing on fan fiction so much because once I got more creative, fanfic is like a safe space. You're supposed to follow the rules in fanfic. So I started to break the rules and people weren't happy about it. So I was like, fine, I'll write my own books. And then the ideal world would have been traditional publishing because I don't like to run my own business. I also, having heard all these wonderful self-publishing stories, I just want to tell you that if you're a self-published author and you get approached by a publisher, email an agent immediately. Do not deal directly with the publisher. They will exploit you, okay? An agent will take 15%, but it will be worth it. Just trust me. I just need you all to know that while I'm here. So anyway, so I started self-publishing things that weren't hitting the market. So Masters of Death, for example, has a vampire in it, and I started querying it during a time when agents said, if you send me vampires, it will be deleted unread, because we were in the post-Twilight oversaturation era. So so I just started self-publishing. Nothing was really going anywhere. I eventually got my agent for my young adult novel, My Mechanical Romance. It was girls in STEM. It was very easily publishable. And then that was in 2020, which was the same year that I self-published The Atlas 6. And then in 2021, while I was in labor with my son, The Atlas 6 went viral on TikTok. And I did not know what was happening. My husband was really bored because labor is really boring for men. I was
super
busy.
fun.
I know. I loved that. He was like, oh, your sales have really gone up. And I'm like, that's cool. Yeah, and so it was just sort of a weird snowball from there of the Atlas 6 getting really viral. There are people who've been following me since my fan fiction days. I always know it's coming because they come in really close and they're like, so I was reading you on fanfiction.net. And all my fanfic is still available, by the way. I'm Olivie Blake on AO3. That's my preferred medium. Yeah, and then the self-published books took off. Tor published a lot of my backlist, and I guess we were supposed to talk about what else we have coming out. Which,
Oh, whoops.
yeah, you guys, we can go back around and
come
do
back
that.
to that. We
Yeah,
can come
well,
back
my
to
next book I'm going to talk to you about because I want to. It's called Girl Dinner, and it's a satire about a cannibal sorority.
Yeah.
And I had the idea at Comic-Con 2 years ago, and I told TJ Klune, and he was like, "That's genius. I'm so mad at you for coming up with it first."
That's like a really good segue into the next question.
Oh, okay,
So,
great.
We're doing great.
Okay, I did it.
And so for this one, since we started going this way, we're going to start with Olivie and Chuck and come back because it's also for everyone. But amid all the more extreme or even shocking elements of your narratives, there's also very deep engagement with real themes, whether it be media consumption, the prevalence of certain tropes in media, gender, class, power, all of those things. Chuck and Lucky Day, which you have coming out. See, it's a good transition. It's okay. You have a world dealing with the collective trauma of shocking and horrific loss and what it means to live through something that violently restructures your life on such a scale. I started tearing up at some point while reading this. And Olivie in Girl Dinner, you have different women struggling to navigate expectations of perfection. And Olivie knows this, but the main character has a small daughter named Isla, and she's in academia. And I also have a 4-year-old named Isla, and I'm in academia. So it very much hit home. This question is for everyone. Again, Chuck or Olivie, if you want to start. Why do you think premises or worlds, plot, narrative elements that seem outlandish can be so effective for engaging more serious themes?
Well, so with Girl Dinner, I had watched the Barbie movie, and I had read the books The Best of Everything by Rona Jaff and Fleischman is in Trouble by Taffy Brodesser-Akner. Those books were published 60 years apart, but they both draw the same conclusion, basically, which is that women can't have it all. And I sort of watched the internet get really into coquette core and clean girl makeup and I'm just a girl, and then Girl Dinner came around and I was like, I think that the memes and stuff, they're really funny. I enjoy them, but I think there might be something dangerous about creating this monolith of girlhood, especially when it seems to bolster traditional feminine roles. And I was starting to get really concerned about the rise in conservative ideology online. And I wanted to write about trad wives, and I wanted to write about the wellness economy, and the whole concept of like, beauty is power, beauty is girl power. Like, what is that? It's it doesn't mean anything, actually. It doesn't hold anybody accountable, and you still don't get to be equally represented in any way. And I was like, well, but obviously we got to do this in a silly, goofy way, though. Like, who's going to read it if I just scream into the void? And so, yeah, I wanted to write a story that was not necessarily just critical of femininity culture, but also like, why do we enjoy this? What does it mean? It's kind of a dark academia book as well because of the university, and the idea of like, what are we willing to compromise for power? What are we willing to do if it means we can finally be safe, if it means we can finally get ahead, which is kind of the fundamental question of dark academia, I think. And cannibals for fun.
Yeah.
I think stories with like absurdity, tackling the chaos of the universe are a very powerful tool right now. That's what Lucky Day is about. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that if you look around at the world, it's a pretty chaotic place at the moment. And I think that we have traditionally been given a lot of stories where the moral is like, oh, the world might seem chaotic, But really listen to this story and it'll tell you that everything makes sense. And I kind of think that culturally, it's like we've maybe grown out of that a bit, where maybe the stories now, and what I was trying to do with Lucky Days, to say, yes, it is very chaotic, and I'm not going to pretend that it's not. But what I am going to say is that by accepting that chaos and finding gratitude and finding moments of love, you can actually do something really powerful. That denying the chaos and the mess of the world might not be as potent as accepting that, and then accepting how wonderfully unique and beautiful we all are within it. The universe is, all of us in this room, everyone has a different story. We all got here because of an unfathomable amount of choices that brought you here. Not only your choices, choices of your parents, choices of their parents, choices of an asteroid 1 million years ago banging into another planet. Yet we are all here amid that chaos, and how lucky we are. So I think finding gratitude in that is very important to me. And that's kind of what I want to capture in my art, is this idea that, yeah, the world is a little wild, but I think that if we focus on just how powerful love is and look within ourselves and say, wow, I might seem kind of like unique and small in this big grand universe, and then say, actually, you're unique and really powerful, because there's nobody out there that is as good as being you as you are. I think that's such a powerful thing, and I think that we can really prove love by coming together and focusing on the things that make us unique.
Wow, I don't know how to follow it up. So I'm most well known for a book that's about a guy and his ex-girlfriend's cat stuck on an alien game show. That's Dungeon Crawler Carl. And at first glance, it's a stupid, silly dude bro book about silly dude bro stuff. But what it's really about is social media culture and how exploitive that those who are stronger than others can be, people who trod on those who are weaker than themselves. And that's what the theme of Carl is. I have another book that's coming out in February. It's a standalone novel. It's called Operation Bounce House. And it's a very similar theme, but it's very focused on gamer culture. I watched dozens and dozens and possibly hundreds of hours of Counter-Strike videos of like little shits, just swearing up a storm and just being online bullies. And I've gotten to the point where I didn't even want to be online anymore playing games, just because everyone's a dick to each other and we don't follow Chuck's rules, like love is real. And that's kind of the message of my next book as well. And I think it's pretty much the message of almost everything I write, where it's about fighting back against injustice in the world. And that's what I like to write about.
I think I kind of approach it in the same way that Matt does. I think no matter how absurd the context or absurd the subject matter, there are real world implications to what you're writing. For me especially, I mean, I've been been basically branded the monster porn girl, which I love. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's silly, right? But I constantly have women coming up to me saying, your books helped me figure out my sexuality. Your books helped me orgasm for the first time, which, I don't need to know that. But I do know that. But I think the point is that there's a more powerful message than you would think in something that on the surface seems silly. I write about a girl who owns her sexuality, who gets everything that she wants, and who doesn't settle for less. And as women in particular, we are not taught to center our pleasure. We're not taught that we matter necessarily in the bedroom or in the world. And I think those are universal issues that I tackle through a lens of, monster porn. And that's fine. I think any way that you can do it that's approachable is worthwhile.
like, as a bookseller, I think that there's so much power in enjoyment. Like, if you enjoy something, you can be moved by something, as absurd as it can start. And I've told Lindsay, her books got me through the election. Like, that was what
They got me through the election too.
is what got me through. It got our other bookseller through the inauguration. It's just like something with joy. So the next question is, what's one of the most impactful compliments or bits of feedback that you've received from a reader? And what has been one of the most fun or entertaining responses that you've gotten in a complimentary way, obviously? And side note, I did write these questions before, but I have since learned that Matt might want to start with something that happened on the trip here on the plane.
Oh, so I do have lots of fan interactions. But on the plane here, I was on the airplane and there was a kid sitting next to me the whole time, and he looked at me once or twice, and I didn't think anything of it. But once we finally landed, he looks at me and says, "Are you Matt Dinniman?" And I was like, "Yes, I am." And he got really excited, and he stood up, and his mom was behind him, and he shouted, "Mom, this is the guy that writes the foot fetish book." And every head on the airplane just turned and looked right at me. And I kind of wish Lindsay was there. I mean, well, she's, the queen of monster porn, so. But I get stuff like that all the time. It's really fun because there's with the Carl universe, there's a wide variety of different fans. I told this story last weekend. I was actually at your store, Mysterious Galaxy. A woman came up to me and she was crying, and she had said that her husband really loved my books and he had just died. And the new book he hadn't read yet, and she wanted me to sign it so she could put it on his grave. And this is a true story. I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And standing in line right behind her was a woman that was dressed like Mongo, the dinosaur. And people were she was hamming it up and everyone was laughing. And that's kind of like the vibe I go for it. There's seriousness mixed in. People really come through with something. They get real meaning in our words, but then they're also having a really, really good time and enjoying the fandom with each other, and that's my favorite part.
Nice.
Do you want to go next? We kind of go. Yeah,
we can do that. Okay. Gosh, I have had every fan interaction under the sun, I think. Given the subject matter of my books, I've had husbands thank me for their wife reading this book. I've had marriage counselors tell me they recommend it in their sessions. I've had therapists say that their clients told them to read it and then it changed their life. I've had anything you could possibly imagine. Those are the funny ones, but I've also had women who have left an abusive relationship and said that kind of the main character, Tem's strength, helped them do that, and that makes me feel really good. And, none of those interactions are kind of more or less important than any of the others. I think they're all impactful, and it's a pleasure and an honor to even be able to provide any type of a story that people can connect to in any type of way. And so, yeah, truly, but do not tell me about your orgasms, guys, any of you, because I've heard too much.
So I have, I'm an interesting case because when I am not wearing this, when I'm trotting around, I don't really have people recognize me for my books. So I don't really get spotted out for that. Who knows who could be, maybe I get spotted for something else. Who knows who could be under this mask. But not a lot of folks stopping me to talk about the Tinglers. However, when I am at a thing like Comic-Con, I do have some fun interactions. I was just, I think this was at New York Comic-Con, this last one, and I was trotting around, and someone very excitedly came up to me and was like, "Oh, can I get a photo? I think this may," and they were so excited, very complimentary. We took a photo. They were like, "Thank you so much." And then as they were leaving, they were like, "That is the best Chuck Tingle cosplay I have ever seen." And I said, thank you. I actually, what I said to them was, yeah, thanks. I really worked hard on it. And then I think they posted later, and something happened where I saw their post, and then I said, oh no, that was actually me. So they did find out later. And as far as like, what is like kind of really moving about it, I think, I'm a neurodivergent buckaroo, and you don't say, Chuck, but I am on the autism spectrum, and so a lot of me presenting myself in this unusual way is because, I did spend a lot of my life masking without the mask. It's just like kind of emotionally masking, and it's really nice to kind of be out here. When I first, was kind of learning about my autism diagnosis, I looked to David Byrne from the Talking Heads, who are my favorite band ever. Love that band, and when I was diagnosed, I knew that he was on the spectrum, and so I thought, that is so cool. I'm in the cool kids club now, which is actually at the time, that was a very unique reaction. At the time, it was like it was really hard thing to hear, and it still can be. But I really think I feel great about being able to be out here, be proud of being autistic, and have young buckaroos come up to me and be like, oh, I just got my autism diagnosis. Like, it didn't break my heart like it used to, for a lot of buckaroos. They say, like, I got it, and I thought, oh, that's so cool. I'm autistic like Chuck Tingle is. So that really means a lot to me. I am getting a little teary even talking about it right now, but that really means a lot to me. So those are my favorite interactions for sure.
Yeah, I feel similarly being bipolar. It's nice to have, because that diagnosis did break my heart when I got it. And it's been nice to be able to talk about the fact that actually the way that my brain works, it's a great benefit to me. It allows me to be creative. Obviously, it's always, with any neurodivergence or mood disorder, whatever, it makes things difficult to exist. But I wouldn't be able to make the art that I make if I didn't have the downs and the ups that I sometimes have. But I was going to say that I have, because of fan fiction, my audience was always primarily women, such that women used to ask me a lot of questions, which is why I have sort of an Agony Aunt YouTube series. It's like not professional in any way. I don't really recommend you look into it unless you want to ask me a question, which I will answer. But what has been surprising since being traditionally published is that, like, I kind of, because my audience was so primarily feminine, I always thought of it like that Trader Joe's skit where, like, the men can't see the snacks at all. Like, only women can, like, I just thought that's what my books were. And so I think in terms of funny things, it's always Meet Cute, the romance bookstore in San Diego. They were like, Alone with You in the Ether is our #1 pick for straight men. And I was like, that's fascinating information. And I also got a DM from a player on the Ravens. It was very nice, super polite. Dear Miss Blake, I really loved the Atlas series. It made me think about so many things I've never considered before. And I was like, oh my God, this is like a man. So that's my funny story.
Nice. I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to move to audience questions, as this is a fan space. But I think in fandom, there's a joy in finding details and figuring out connections. I think that is something that can bring fans together. It makes us happy. So the question is, what is a detail or something small that you included in your books that you're a fan of, something that you wrote that gives you joy? Like, when you think about it, you're like, that was fun. And anyone can start.
I can start. I'll just say, well, my answer is probably not going to make anybody happy, but because it's almost the opposite of what you're asking. But I think, like, for me, like, the things that I left out gave me the most joy, because I hate world building. So naturally, I write fantasy, but I am not a world builder. That's just not in I just don't care. And so whenever I got to something that I didn't know, I just left it out. So one of my main characters, one of the love interests, I never gave him a last name. I was just like, he doesn't need one. And then the main character, her mom doesn't have a name. Didn't care. Didn't think of one. The land that they exist in doesn't have a name. There's a mountain range, no name. Someone once was like, "Is there going to be a map?" And I was like, "What? I don't know." What would you label anything on the map? I didn't name the village that it occurs in, the land that it occurs in. I didn't do any of that. I just so I think like leaving things out gave me joy. And
I think that's incredible. That is an incredible.
Well, and I think it was fine because like ultimately it gave other people joy too, because I have people always asking me, you know, what's Leo's last name? And I'm like, yeah, make one up. I don't care. It's whatever you want it to be, babe. Like
The royals don't have
Give
a
me your
last
last
name.
name.
It's fine.
yeah, anything you want. So I think like details are fun, of course, and it's always fun to put little Easter eggs in your book that are maybe, I don't know, maybe someone you hate, you give them the name of, you know, whatever. That's fun. But I leave things out, and that gives me far more joy.
I have kind of a similar answer. Mine are all the accidental things. I'm what's called a pantser. I make it all up as I go along. I don't plot anything at a time. And when I first started writing the first Carl book, I just had him run out in his boxers and no shoes on. Oh, we had Crocs on, and he loses them. And then I realized it's funny to leave him in his underwear, and suddenly you see these people in their underwear walking around all over Comic-Con because they're cosplaying my book, and I never anticipated that. Earlier, people said, how much research did you plan into the cosplay design of your character? And it's all accidental. Carl doesn't have a last name either, and he's never going to have a last name. People a lot of times ask me, like, wow, you plotted this so well because this pays off in book 7. And the truth is I had forgotten about it when I was all through book 6, and then so people started complaining about it, and then suddenly I make it pay off. And that's always, it's always, you know, the fans talking about my book online and to me, talking kind of how it was with the TV show Lost when it was first coming out, where like, everyone was talking about it because they didn't know what the fuck was going on. And that's kind of my favorite part about my particular series is it creates so much conversation that I get to enjoy kind of from the outside.
I am the exact opposite. I plan everything. Like I plan so far ahead on so much stuff, not just in the books, but like connecting. So I have all my Tingleverse erotica, and those kind of connect. 400 books is a lot of connections. And then on my horror, those all kind of connect. So like there's things in Camp Damascus right here that are references to, I try not to, like it's really easy when you have an interconnected world to like reference something in a book that goes back in time because you already wrote that book. And that always bothered me. It kind of takes me out because I'm like, oh, very curious that none of these people seem to cross over forward. Interesting how that works. So I actually go out of my way to do that. Like there's things in Camp Damascus actually that I just say it because the book's going to come out in like 2 weeks. In Lucky Day, my new book that's coming out takes place at a casino called the Great Britannica Hotel and Casino. That's like a British-themed casino. And in Camp Damascus, there's an entire scene about a poker chip that one of the characters got from the Great Britannica Casino. So I've been just planning that for years. I plant these little things in them. And the whole time I've been thinking, okay, but how can I connect my horror books to my erotica? And finally, in Lucky Day, there is like an actual connection to my Bigfoot erotica. And so as far as things I'm proud of, that's my proudest achievement, is finally connecting the horror universe to my Bigfoot erotica. So there you go.
I love my little jokes. I think I'm so funny. And pretty much all of my concepts come from a joke. So with the Atlas series, I was like, what if there was a character who could speak to nature, who could actually hear plants, and she just hates it? And like she's just so annoyed all the time. And with Gifted and Talented, I was trying to think of a new way to, I really like to play with form. So I was like, how can I tell this story? What kind of narration style can I use that will feel new and interesting? And I was like, what if we do it as though there is an objective narrator, but gradually throughout the course of the book, you realize that the narrator has strong feelings about the character, and this voice of God suddenly actually really hates them and is maybe not God. And with Girl Dinner, I mean, the cannibal sorority, that was like the joke from the start. But I do want to tell you that there are two jokes that I'm particularly pleased with. One is when Sloan, who is the adjunct professor, she's talking to the chair of her department basically, and he is disappointed that she's a sociology professor, he's disappointed that she wants to write about trad wives because he thinks that's not serious. And so he says, Sloan, like if we think about this really hard, maybe we can find a man at the center of this thought experiment, and that man can talk to him, and together they can find a way. And also, the arc does not have this joke because I came up with it on the first pass. Normally, they don't want you to write more stuff on the first pass, but my production editor was like, no, this was worth it. That I said revenge tasted like the feminine mesquite. And I just want you to know that little joke is so special and important to me.
So we have about 8 minutes. We're going to move to the Q&A. If anybody has any questions for our authors, there's a microphone right in the middle.
It's a silly question. It's for Olivie. You mentioned earlier that you had your first bad review on Twitter. Do you remember who that was, and do you still interact with them?
This is a complex thing to discuss because I used to write Dramini fan fiction. I no longer engage with that source material. Don't stand behind it in any way. But that reviewer did call me a fascist for writing romantically about Draco Malfoy. And I hear it. I accept that criticism. I've moved on spiritually.
Hi. First of all, thank you for this panel. It's been great. There's a couple of you I've stalked at book panels throughout the con. And thank you for all you're doing. I just wanted to ask, as like writers who came up in fandom and where fans have been so important to your growth, do you when you hear fan comments or feedback, do you take that into account into your future writing, or do you try to leave that aside away from your creative process?
Fan fiction taught me how to please a crowd, or theoretically, assume a good percentage of the internet is not pleased, but that's not my business, What I learned from fan fiction was that it wasn't so much, it wouldn't change my decision about what to do with the plot, for example, or it wouldn't change things based on what people said, but it taught me what people like, what tropes people enjoy, what sort of relationship arcs are interesting to people. When they would say oh, I really like this interaction, I really like this, I found this really romantic, I found this really hot. That's the kind of stuff that's it's so valuable. It's, it's crazy to think that there are other ways to learn how to write.
All writing is writing. When I never published fan fiction, but when I was a kid, I didn't know it was called fan fiction. I used to write a lot of fan fiction. It was Transformers and G.I. Joe and stuff like that. Seriously, and if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't be where I am today.
Yeah, I'll just say quickly, I've also never written fan fiction, except in my head, I guess, about me and Theo James in his Divergent era, but that's none of my business. But I will say, as someone who started on Instagram and was so chronically online for a long time, that you do get a lot of feedback, and doing the chapter drops, I got a lot of feedback from readers, and I just ignored it all of it. That was it. I would hear it, and I would say that's none of my business, and the only time I'll listen is if someone actually points out a plot hole, which did happen, and then I had to go back and fix because I hadn't realized it was there. But other than that, no, I drive the bus. I'm in charge.
I think as a writer, it's good to have people you trust and you take their feedback. And maybe more so than just like.
I listen to my editor.
Yeah.
I don't listen to anyone else.
Hello, my question is for, I think, everybody on the panel. So I think you all use like sexual themes and erotic themes in your books. How do you use sexuality and eroticism to convey like a stronger and larger message?
Well, I will say as a writer of, it's funny because I've written so much erotica, and while like queerness is a big theme in my horror, like they're kind of not very sexual books, actually. It's very divided. And what's funny is that for my erotica, I write this short form stuff. Generally, it will be like the news of the day. If somebody did something, then I write an erotica piece about it. And generally, for me, the sexuality is like, and here's my little hint for anyone wanting to write short form erotica. Instead of like a 3-act structure, all you have to do is think of a problem and then find a way that sex will solve it. That is how you write erotica. So yeah, that's how I do it. It's like a 1-beat story. Well, multiple beat story, I guess, but you know what I mean.
I think it's great to write queer characters where the queerness is the least interesting thing about them. I like to just kind of let them do whatever they're going to do and not make it about, like, I guess my way of celebrating that is by just not pointing to it at all. Just like, let them kiss whoever they want.
I think for me, my answer is very short, but just writing about sex allows me to write about power, because that's really what sex is about. It's about an exchange of power, who's holding it at one time, who is giving or receiving it, or who holds the power. And so I think it's a universal language, right, that everyone understands. And even if you're not having sex, you still understand it. That's a form of power in itself. And so I think it's a way to write about a power that doesn't seem like it's a way to write about power.
And I don't write erotica, but I do have lots of like sexual themes. There's like dinosaur and dinosaur sex. There's there's obviously there's an AI that sexualizes the main character, and a lot of times I use it as a way to, since it's not erotica and it's the way for character development. We learn about characters, we learn about plot points through the way that they interact with sexuality, because a lot of people, how they react to something like that tells you a lot about the type of person they are, I think, and that's how I deal with it.
Thank you.
All right.
So as somebody who wants to make the jump from writing mostly fan fiction to writing more original stuff, for the people who did write fan fiction, was it hard to make the jump from having an established sandbox to play in versus making your own worlds?
Sorry. I already feel like I talk too much, and then, okay. For
Other
me,
people can have opinions too. It's not all on you.
well, like I said, I started writing original stuff because I was starting to break the fan fiction rules. I was like, what if Hermione Granger was a psychopath? There's a very fine line, in my opinion, and people didn't like that, and so I think part of it was just like, oh, I want to start breaking these rules. I want to start doing it in this specific way. As an author, I also cross genre lines quite a lot, and it was something I was doing when I was writing fan fiction as well. I think fan fiction is fun because you get to play in all these different worlds. You can do all sorts of AUs. You learn all kinds of things about genre and about genre expectations. You don't learn about pacing, though. Fan fiction will not teach you anything about pacing. All of my books are too slow, sorry. And, but I don't know, I think at some point it's just like, well, what if I could do whatever I wanted? It's kind of freeing, it's fun.
We are at the end of our time. Sorry, I got the eye. Huge thank you to our panelists.